All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Curator Meagan Huff, and I'm the curator at Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. And today, I'm going to be talking about dogs, dog history at Fort Vancouver. And I have with me my dog. This is Lola, and she's joining me today. You are. Mm, mm. She's very friendly. She's a King Charles Cavalier Spaniel, and she's a few years old. I don't know how old she is. I can't think of it right now, but she's happy to be here. Me too. All right, so while we are waiting for folks to tune in, I have shared in the description of this video, and I will share in the comments too, a link to a photo gallery of images that are images I'm going to talk about while I'm doing this talk. You can look at it while the talk is going on, or you can look at them later. But I will put that in the comments in case you aren't seeing it in the description. All right. So I'll give folks a few more minutes, but while we are waiting, I wanted to ask if there's anyone out there who's watching now who likes to bring your dog to Fort Vancouver National Historic Site or another national park, and just tell us in the comments if you like to explore public lands with your dogs or your pets. If you like to bring your cats or your ferrets or whatever other animals you have, if they like to come to public lands with you. Lola does not go on many walks at Fort Vancouver. She used to, but she has a neurological condition that makes walking a little hard for her. So she has a lot of fun in our backyard and in our house, but she's not an outdoorsy dog, and we're okay with that. Especially right now. It's nice to have an indoorsy dog at the moment. All right, if you are just tuning in or just joining us, I'm wondering, and you can put it in the comments anytime, if you bring your dog or your pet to Fort Vancouver or to another national park. There's so many. If you have a furry dog like Lola, you know that at the end of this video, you can already see it. My green sweater will be white. So that's what I have to look forward to this evening. All right. And I want to make sure that if you do bring your pets to Fort Vancouver, that you know our Bark Ranger rules. So Fort Vancouver has a lot of great trails and places to walk your dog. But we do have some rules that we would like folks to follow. And one is that it's the BARK rule, so it's an acronym. B is for bag your pet's poop. It's a courtesy to your fellow visitors, and it's good for the earth too. If you are bagging your pet's waste and then also throwing that bag away. A is for always keep your pet on a leash. So we ask that visitors bring their dogs to the park on a leash that is no longer than 6 feet. R is for respect wildlife. We are not a big wildlife park, but we do have birds and rabbits and things like that. So if you see one of those while you're on a walk with your dog, please keep your dog at a respectful distance from wildlife. And K is for know where you can go. So pets are not allowed inside park facilities at Fort Vancouver, including the reconstructed Fort, Pearson Air Museum, and the Visitor Center. But they are welcome to be outside on a leash and on our trails. So I'm going to put a link to our pets page, where you can learn about bringing your pet to Fort Vancouver. And you'll see that, and that's in the comments. And you will see a picture of Lola there back in her walking days. And since more folks have tuned in, if you like to bring your dog to Fort Vancouver, you like to bring your dog to other national parks or other places, Let us know in the comments and share that with us, please. All right, so I think I'm going to put Lola down so I can have two hands. So say goodbye to Lola. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about dogs in the fur trade period and before the fur trade period. So by the time the European explorers started arriving in the Northwest in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, dogs were already an important part of life in the Northwest. And while eating dog meat was sometimes accepted in some Native American tribes, and fur traders sometimes traded with tribes for dog meat. For the Chinook people and the people living along the Columbia River, dogs were a part of everyday life and were generally not eaten, except perhaps as part of very specific special ceremonies. Dogs were also used by Native people in this area for hunting, and they could flush out deer or elk from prairies. A notable Northwest dog from this pre-contact time period was the Coast Salish bulldog. This is a dog that was developed and bred by Native people, and its fur was used for weaving. So it was a sort of George Vancouver actually saw these dogs and described them as a larger Pomeranian, but white. So kind of a long-haired dog with the tail that curls up onto the back, and with that long white fur that they would cut really short and then use for weaving. The Coast Salish bulldog is now extinct. Once fur traders started bringing in wool blankets for trade, the demand for the wool from the dogs started to go down, and so they eventually went extinct. And I am going to share, again in the comments, a link to an article about the Coast Salish bulldog, because I think it's a fascinating story, and you should go learn more about it. I will say we had a comment on the post we shared yesterday. There was a question from Erin about the wool dogs, and she asked if there were any pictures of wool dogs at Fort Vancouver or Vancouver Barracks, and the answer is no, but there is a slight connection to our site. There was an ethnologist in the 19th century named George Gibbs who was writing about the tribes in Washington Territory as it was in the 1850s when he was working or traveling through this area. And he passed through Vancouver Barracks occasionally, and he owned a Coast Salish wool dog named Mutton, who may have been bred by the Stala Nation. There's a lot of research around Mutton. And we don't know if Mutton ever visited Vancouver Barracks, but unfortunately, in 1859, there was an incident where Mutton destroyed a mountain goat specimen that had been collected by another naturalist. And in retaliation, Mutton himself was made into a specimen. And so now he, or his pelt, resides at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History and is used for studying these Coast Salish bulldogs. Now, dogs were also used by Euro-Canadians for hunting and for pets as well. In 1793, there was a fur trader named Alexander Mackenzie who was working for the Northwest Company, and he became one of the first Euro-Canadians to have crossed North America. And he brought with him a dog as a companion on that trip. And he later wrote about his journey, and he mentioned the dog several times, including some adventurous episodes, like when the dog captured a bison calf for the group. And around this time, dogs started to become a standard part of expeditions and journeys across America. In 1805, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark crossed the country on their Corps of Discovery expedition, and they had with them Seaman, who was a Newfoundland dog that served as a hunting dog. Lewis and Clark came through this area and described the dogs kept by the Clatsop and Chinook people in this area as small or smaller than the common cur, and black, white, brown, and brindle colored. And he wrote that they had long heads, pointed noses, small pricked ears, and short, smooth hair. That was the kind of common dog that you could see around this area at that time. All right, and here at Fort Vancouver, we have found archaeological evidence of dogs being kept as pets, particularly in the Fort Vancouver village. The village was located to the west of the fort, and it was home to a diverse population of fur trappers and traders, laborers, anyone who worked at the fort who wasn't of the gentleman class, and their families. In 1970, an archaeologist named Susan Cardis was excavating in the village near the former location of the house when she found a fully articulated dog skeleton. The dog stood about 2 feet high at the shoulder and had a short face. And she found a 2.5-inch long brass straight pin in the soil between the dog's pelvis bones. And she thought that perhaps the dog had died by eating this pin and been buried near the home where it lived. In 2013, archaeologists found 2 more dog burials in the village, and there are some pictures of this on that photo gallery. I put a link to the photo gallery in the comments, and then there's also a link in the video description. And if you go to that link, you will see the first photo is a large dog that was found in the village. And then we also found that year, this was part of the public archaeology field school, we also found that year a smaller dog. So there was the large dog, which has that fully articulated skeleton. And then there was this smaller dog. So the smaller dog, we were digging down in this excavation unit, and you can see in that the second photo that its little head was just peeking into the unit. And then we kind of, as you can see in the third photo in that gallery, extended the unit so that we could just find more of the dog's remains. And the interesting thing about that dog is that you can see in the soil around it, there's this greenish, bluish staining. And we thought, the theory was that, and it was kind of fibrous too, fibery. So we think that that was probably the remains of a blanket, that the dog had been wrapped in a blanket of some kind and then buried that way. And both of those burials that we found in 2013 were relatively close to people's houses, people's homes. So it suggested that these were pet dogs that were buried kind of in people's backyards, as people still do today. So moving forward in history, we'll go ahead to the dogs that were kept at Vancouver Barracks. If you have any questions, do feel free to put them in the comments. I am checking that every once in a while. So if you have any questions, just put them right there. So if you're unfamiliar with the history of our site, the area where we are, where Fort Vancouver National Historic Site is in Washington State, became part of the United States in 1846. And Vancouver Barracks was established by the U.S. Army in 1849 alongside the existing Hudson's Bay Company, Fort Vancouver. And the Army and the Hudson's Bay Company coexisted for a while, but in the 1860s, the Hudson's Bay Company relocated their operations to Canada. And that area became all Vancouver Barracks. So dogs in the 19th century military were important animals, and they could herd livestock, track the enemy, detect intruders, pull supply or casualty carts, and they were commonly kept by soldiers as troop mascots or personal pets. So Army records from Vancouver Barracks note that in the 1870s, Companies E and I of the 21st Infantry actually converted an enlisted men's bathroom and lavatory at Vancouver Barracks into a dog kennel. So they had more than one dog. And these dogs may have operated as sentries or in military scouting missions that the 21st Infantry was doing in the 1870s. Now in the photo gallery, you will see the fourth image is the image of a bulldog skull. And that skull and the rest of the dog's remains were found by archaeologists in the early 1980s. The dog was buried by the Army near a brick pedestal at the Quartermaster Cavalry Stable between 1879 and 1881. And because the bulldog was buried by the stables, it may have helped the quartermaster's depot with managing the cattle that were corralled on site to feed the troops. And in 1903, the 8th Battery was stationed at Vancouver Barracks, and they had at least 2 mascot dogs with them while they were stationed here, one of which was named Spud. And if you look in that photo gallery, this is the next image, the black and white photographs that are there. There's one of 2 soldiers, but they're wearing their civilian clothes while they're digging it looks like a trench or a ditch. And there's a wheelbarrow, and there's a little dog on the wheelbarrow sitting up, and that's probably Spud. And then next to them is another dog that's kind of a retriever type. Spud is kind of that short-nosed bulldog type of dog. Oops. And then the next image is of the 8th Battery football team. So there's lots of sports going on at Vancouver Barracks to keep up morale and keep people happy and interested in living there still. And so here you can see their football team. Some of their jerseys have the number 8 on it for 8th Battery. And at either end of the photo, there are soldiers who are holding these little short-nosed bulldoggy type of dogs. And there's a note on the back of the photo that says that both dogs are wearing red little capes. So red must have been their football team's color. And you'll notice that some of the players have these things hanging around their necks that look very strange. And those are actually vintage football face masks. So they have a little thing that would go around your forehead, and then it was this rubber thing that would go over your face, and you could kind of, hi Nadine, and you would just, there was like a bit in it that you would bite, and it would protect your nose and face. They look a little weird to us today. And then the last picture from the 8th Battery is the little dogs, Spud maybe, or the other one, sitting on the back of a horse doing its signature little paws up pose. All right, and dogs remained important animals for troop morale at Vancouver Barracks into the 20th century. During World War I, the Army constructed a huge spruce mill at Vancouver Barracks to mill lumber for aircraft production during the war. And in 1918, the 18th Spruce Squadron stationed at the spruce mill kept a dog mascot named Jane. And at that time, there was a soldier's newspaper at the barracks called the Straight Grain. And the 18th Spruce Squadron reported in the October 26, 1918 issue of the Straight Grain, they wrote this. They said, "Our official mascot is on the job. She's a full-blooded registered Airedale from Kentucky, donated by the Kentucky Kennel Association. She's 2 years old, and her name is Jane. Sergeant Skinner paid the express charges, $12. Corporal Gauld has built her a house. Joe Sari has been appointed private nurse, and the entire squadron personnel are self-appointed bodyguard. She's some Jane." They really like their dog Jane. But then in the November 2nd issue, the 18th Spruce Squadron reported that, quote, "Jane is some dog, and she has a powerful smell this wet weather." So they got their Kentucky dog into that Northwest rain. In the November 9th issue, they then reported that one of their corporals in the squadron, who actually used to train animals for the circus, was training Jane, or teaching Jane some new tricks. Additional mascots at the spruce mill could be found in the 14th Squadron, which had a dog named Tug. The 29th Squadron had a dog named Dynamite, and the 23rd Squadron had a mascot dog named Bridget. And Bridget's costume, this little felt green cape, is in our museum collection. And you can see a photo of that in that gallery as well. And so I just have one question that I saw a comment, and that kind of wraps it up, but I had one question I wanted to answer that was commented on the posts yesterday, and that was, dogs are great. What about cats? Were there any cats at Vancouver Barracks or Fort Vancouver? And probably, there's cats everywhere. But there is one thing that I thought of when I saw that question, and that's that the 16th Spruce Squadron did come into possession of a female cat and her kittens at the Spruce Mill. And in the October 1918 Straight Grain, they wrote about trying to find a good home for them. Before that, at Fort Vancouver, there certainly could have been cats. We have found some bones archaeologically that are in the museum collection that may have come from cats. They're sort of identified as cat/rodent, or maybe cat and dog. So at some point, a cat specialist might look at them and determine if they're really from cats. And cats were often passengers on ships called ship's cats. During that time, because they could help control the rodent population aboard ships. And there were a lot of ships coming and going through Fort Vancouver on the Columbia River at that time. So a cat could have come to or visited this area that way. And that kind of wraps it up for me today. I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you enjoy bringing your dog to Fort Vancouver for walks, I hope that you're able to enjoy that when it's a little rainy today, but maybe another day when it's sunny. And of course, if you do bring your dog for a walk to Fort Vancouver, we hope that you will follow the CDC guidelines about social distancing. So yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks.